The nation's Social Justice Commissioner has demanded action over the spiralling rate of Indigenous incarceration, which he's labelled a catastrophe and a human rights crisis. Despite progress in some other measures, the number of Indigenous people behind bars has risen by nearly 60% in the past 15 years. In his latest report, Mick Gooda says reducing rates of imprisonment is the most urgent social justice challenge facing the country. This report from Jessica Kidd.
Around half of all young people in juvenile detention are Indigenous, and Indigenous incarceration has jumped 57% since the year 2000.
That's a sad indictment when you think of kids getting their education in prison instead of at a high school somewhere.
And the figures show young Indigenous people are more likely to return to prison than they are to stay in school.
That's just a catastrophe in anyone's language.
The Social Justice Commissioner says Indigenous incarceration is an intergenerational problem.
We know if people are in houses or families where people have been put in jail, they're more likely to go to jail themselves. So these intergenerational effects start happening and building on each other, and we're getting this cohort of people who basically become institutionalised really young, and that continues right through to their adult age.
Mick Gooda has launched his 5th report card on the state of Indigenous affairs. In it, he makes 3 recommendations to reduce Indigenous offending. He wants to see justice targets adopted as part of the Closing the Gap goals, more justice reinvestment, money diverted from the criminal justice system to prevent crime, and cooperation between governments and the newly formed National Justice Coalition representing Aboriginal communities. Including justice targets in Closing the Gap would require the federal government to report its progress to Parliament.
It's a goal, it's something you want to try to achieve, and it focuses the mind on what you need to bring those numbers down.
A 2-year trial of justice reinvestment is already underway in the northwestern New South Wales town of Burke. The collaboration between the Indigenous community, the police and local courts is trying to address the root causes of Indigenous crime and stop it happening, rather than punishing the offenders.
Justice reinvestment is very much a data-driven approach, so it would look at what is causing crime in that particular community. So looking at drug and alcohol, mental health, education, employment. What about those key areas is causing crime in that community?
The government's being urged to adopt the recommendations, if only to improve its budget bottom line.
The billions of dollars we're spending in Australia locking Aboriginal people up could be spent on giving Aboriginal people a better say in their future.
The government says it's determined to bring down Indigenous incarceration rates, but it's ruled out more targets. Instead, it says it will focus on delivering practical frontline services to improve the lives of Indigenous Australians. Jessica Kidd, LateLine.